Hi everyone, welcome back to Box of Delights. Got a bit of a treat today. We're looking at Kreel Manor, the dungeon crawl card game, the new release from Hall or Nothing. It's not out yet. Tristan Hall, the publisher and designer, has lent me this copy so that I can show you, give you a little bit of a sneak preview of what's to come. Now do bear in mind this is a pre-production prototype, so not everything in here is final components, far from it. I'm actually going to reset back to the beginning because I've been playing this and there is deck construction as you go along, so you'll play a series of scenarios just like Veilwraith. Remember Veilwraith? So just like Veilwraith, your deck will progress as you move through the game from scenario to scenario. So I'm going to pull everything back to the first scenario. This game is a natural progression from Veilwraith. It's following the same kind of game principles and that same card play. It is a solo card game. We're going to be playing solo today, but this is a solo or multiplayer game. It plays 1 to 3 or up to 4 with an expansion. And we're going to see some of that expansion content today with a stack of content for you to get stuck into. Tristan also sent me a playmat to share with you, so we'll have a look at that as well. Wonderful stuff. I'm going to use this side, which is the markings on it, to help you locate everything for play. Right, let's get set up. Let's get going. The game is set in the mythical world of Kilforth. In the base game, you've got 3 heroes to choose from. You've got the Wolf of the North, and each double-sided here. The stats here are wrong, by the way. It says 16 starting health. It should be 20. You got the Night Raven or the War Mage. And then the 2 expansions, Path of the Dead, Path of Song, add new heroes. So we see the Necromancer and the Melody Scribe. It would be rude of me not to play the Wolf of the North, so let's take on that role today. Wolf of the North. I don't have a dial in this prototype that Tristan has lent me, so I'm going to be using the Veilwraith health dial. Set at 20, like I say, this is a typo. Okay. So this is a very strongly narrative-driven game. I've got a printout here of the Book of Fables. Okay, so this Book of Fables is going to be kind of driving the story along, and it's got little chapter headings, you know, like a choose your own adventure type thing. Turn to page 9, read the little section, perhaps make a decision or gain some benefit or take some damage, that kind of stuff. All right, so the game is going to be driving this strong narrative, and every character has his own little backstory here. So we can see the Wolves of the North are a noble faction of knights, always taking care of their people's needs, looking after local villagers and adhering to their lord's calls to arms, whilst trying to bring justice and honour to the troubled lands. The Wolves are but one of many factions or tongues, on account of their language differences, of the Knights of the Realm, and their combat prowess is only rivaled by the most fearsome and prestigious faction, the Rosen Knights, or Knights of the Rose. You're probably familiar with those from the Kilforth games. All right, so we're in the same setting, but this time we're inside Kreel Manor, exploring this dungeon. So a dungeon crawling card game. Wonderful. We're going to be playing through with our deck a series of threats. Okay, we're going to be getting through. If you remember Veilwraith, right? You've got a stack of threats. You have to get through those threats, defeat a series of foes, a series of plots, and in Kreel Manor, defeat the final adventure location. We're going to see that play out as we go along, and that completes the scenario. Then you keep your deck, you'll upgrade your deck, and then you'll move through the next scenario. And I say all the while being supported by the Book of Fables. We start every game or every adventure with reading a chapter, The Great Hall of Kreel. Let me summarize for you. Within the hollowed chambers of the Shadow Council, a solemn assembly is convened to deliberate on the perilous mission ahead, to infiltrate Kreel Manor and halt the sinister machinations of Arcturus Blackwood, the Lord of Kreel Manor. We find ourselves stepping through the looming archway of the sinister citadel. You venture deeply into the dimly lit corridors, where the councillors warned of an encounter with the Goblin Chief, the first of the Lord's champions. During setup, we'll get a 20-card deck. We'll have 10 hero skill cards, and you can choose these, so there is some deck construction if you want at the beginning of the game, though it does, at the back of the rulebook, suggest which 10 basic skill cards to use. And then each hero, so for the Wolf of the North, it's those with this axe in the bottom right corner, you get 10 specific cards. And you'll choose one of these class skill cards to go in your starting hand. So again, it's a free choice. I'm going to choose the combat adaptability, one of those. The other 9 will get shuffled with the 10 hero skill cards to create your starting deck, which we'll place here. And then at the bottom of that deck, you'll place what's called a mastery. Okay, so this is a special skill that we will only get to once we get through our deck for the first time. Okay, so we'll draw that mastery after some time. Right? So every different hero has a different class. Okay, this is the different classes. Mine's blade. Okay, strength is my 1 blade here. Right, so there's 5 altogether, and then each has its own set of class skills, but also upgrades. All right, so the blade skills can be upgraded. So as you move through the campaign, you may get some upgrades, which means you can upgrade one of your skills, all right, one of your class skills, blade skills for me, to one of these upgraded versions. Each class also has its own mastery. Okay, so there's necromancy here, has Nilim's grip of death as their mastery. Right, so each, I mean, look at the volume of cards. Each class has its own set of skill decks, skill cards. And like I said, there's some basic skills as well. So this is the recommended starting 10 that I took, but there's tons to choose from. So you can build your deck up. These are all the hero skills with these extra basic skills. Loads of stuff, loads of cards. While we're talking about loads of cards, I mean, these are all the different foes and enemies and plots that you're going to be facing. Right? Loads of them. Okay. Lots of stuff. Cool. One other thing to note is that the wolf here begins with a starting asset, the woven blade. Here it is. So one thing that's different in Kreel Manor to Velwraith is that you have assets. Okay, so you've got body armor, head armor, you've got boots you can wear, you've got a backpack you can store stuff in, and you've got 2 hands where you can hold assets. So here we start with the woven blade, okay, which is going to give me a +1 to my fight skill. And you can collect new assets as you go along. There's different ones associated with each class, but there's also decks. There's silver assets and bronze assets. Okay, so different assets that can be found as you're traveling through the dungeon. All right, so you can pick up different things, like we've got some leather greaves here, a broadsword, right, elven cloak, all sorts of things that you'd expect from a wonderful fantasy adventure. We love it when there's treasures to be found. The other types of cards you see here are adventures and locations. We'll come back to these in a second, but these are our threats. Now, threats are divided into threat groups. So this here is the Wormkin Goblin threat group. It says Wormkin Goblin at the bottom. Right? Each group of threats consists of 6 cards. You get 5 threats. These are the ones in blue, and then 1 plot. These are the ones in green. Okay, so for the Worm King goblins, we've got these 5 threats and 1 plot. All right. Now it turns out we're playing the adventure number 1, the Great Hall, and it says to set aside the non-plot Worm King goblins. So I'm going to grab these 5. The plot one I'm not going to need. Okay. And I'm going to set these aside and then build out the rest of my threat deck, which is here in the setup instructions. All right. So it says we need a Goblin Chief, and it says to place him in stack 4. So we're going to have multiple stacks. This guy's going to go in stack number 4. So we're just going to start laying out our threats in stacks. And it tells you which set of threats we're going to use. So we've got Deep Dwarves, Manor Guard, Manor Servant, Wildclaw, Vermin, Swarm. And it also says Scale Tongue, Lizard Man. This last one's in parentheses. We only use this in a 3 to 4 player game, so we're going to ignore that one. This is a rare threat group, right? But the rest we're going to grab, and we'll want all 6 cards. So the 5 threats plus the 1 plot from each of these groups. We'll separate out the 5 plots. Okay. And the rest we'll shuffle together. This Goblin Chief is our foe. Okay, so we've got plots, threats, and a foe. We've got to defeat the foe, we've got to defeat the plots, and we've got to defeat our adventure. So this is kind of a little something new in Kreel Manor. And depending on which scenario you're playing, there may be some story cards in play as well. In fact, we've got a story card, but it's waiting for us in the threat area. But there may be some that get shuffled into these different stacks and ultimately the threat deck. We'll take our 5 plot cards that we set aside, we'll give them a shuffle up, and this is how we're going to start creating our stacks. Okay, so stacks 1, 2, 3. Remember, foe in stack 4 and stack 5, and then the rest are our threats, and we'll just deal those out equally to these stacks. And then make sure we shuffle each of those stacks up so that the plot is somewhere within them. And obviously for this stack, the plot and the foe is somewhere mixed in amongst it. Okay. And then we'll create our deck with stack 1 on the top there. As I say, we're playing adventure number 1, the Great Hall, but there's lots. Okay? There's lots that are going to come along and entertain you and challenge you. But to progress to the Great Hall, we need some location cards. Right, these are our location cards. It says that we need 2 standard plus the gateway. So there's the gateway location, the entrance location. Okay. Plus 2 standard. I'm going to choose those randomly. So we grab all the standard locations, give them a shuffle, and grab 2. So you can see there's a whole bunch of variety, even just setting up the first scenario in the game. Right, 2 standard locations. Gateway is going to be first. We'll make this the active location. And then the adventure itself is also a location. This becomes our final location that we're going to have to defeat to complete the scenario, to complete our quest. Okay, so that goes on the bottom. You can look at this any time, but it is there on the bottom. So we've got to make our way through some locations, starting with the gateway. And we're going to get through these locations the same way we defeat threats, plots, and foes. In this case, we're going to be using our sneak. We're going to be sneaking through these locations. Okay. There's different types of locations. We've got an endless location here, and we've got dungeon locations. All right, so different scenarios, different adventures will be asking for different types of locations. I wanted to show you all that stuff before we got into gameplay, just so you understood the depth of variability that this game is going to give you. There's tons of adventuring to be had. As it goes, we're pretty much ready to start. Last thing we do, we're just going to place one card in shadows. I'll talk about these in a little while, but shadows are going to progress into the threat area. So at the first part of the game, we're going to have a little bit of buffer before shadows will get pushed. Every turn, a shadow will come out and push the next shadow along until it ends up in the threat area. So we've got a little bit of time in the start of the game before we start seeing some of those threats. That's it for now. Join me next time then, and we shall begin turn 1.